What's up, YouTube? This is the 82 and 0 podcast. Continuing on our look at the 76 greatest players of all time. Although it's the 75 anniversary team, there were 76 players selected. This time we're looking at Oscar Robertson. Now, Oscar Robertson was born November 24th, 1938 in Charlotte, Tennessee. So, when Robertson was growing up, like most people during the Great Depression, he was born in poverty. And he grew up during segregation too, like most people did during this time. And his parents would move to Indianapolis, where he grew up, and segregated housing projects. And during this time, he preferred to play basketball over baseball, which you can understand during the time, baseball was a much more popular sport. And he would go to Crispus Attucks High School. It was an all-black school because it was during Jim Crow. They were segregated. And he was a superb athlete. You know, a lot of guys nowadays, they think players of the 50s, 60s were just dinosaurs. This couldn't be further from the truth. He had a great high school career, and he was named Indiana Mr. Basketball in 1956. And he would enroll at the University of Cincinnati. And he had an incredible scoring average of 33.8 points per game. And that was at the time the third highest in the college history. Now, he would set all kinds of records, and he was named an All-American and was chosen to College Player of the Year. And I think he set something like 14 NCAA records. And he would lead his team, the Bearcats, that's what they were named, to a 79-9 overall record. And he would lead them to a Final Four appearance. However, he didn't get a championship. And when Robinson left college, he was the all-time NCAA scorer until future Hall of Famer Pete Maravich topped him in 1970. So, Robertson, including all of his records, he would have one of 6 games with 50 points or more, career triple-doubles, 10 career rebounds per game, 15.2 in career points, going on to put up 2,973 points. So, he declares for the draft. It would be the 1960 draft. Now, you got to understand, in these earlier NBA days, they had what were called territorial drafts. This obviously doesn't happen anymore. I think they got rid of it, around 1966. But anyways, during the early days, a city like Cincinnati, that's where he played, they could pick anybody in the draft that plays there. So let's say there's a kid who plays really good in Cincinnati. Another team can't pick him because he's considered a territorial pick. He can't just go on a draft board and any team can pick him. The reason why they did this was they were trying to increase fan bases in the NBA at the time, and so they looked at it like, if we draft a player from this hometown, then fans will turn out to see him, to support him. And Wilt Chamberlain was another famous example of this. He was a territorial pick for the Philadelphia Warriors. But anyways, he would play in the 1960 Olympics, where he was co-captains with Jerry West. And another crazy fact, Jerry West was actually drafted the same year that Oscar Robertson was. But anyways, they had one of the greatest basketball teams of all time in terms of Olympic teams. They had Bob Boozer, Daryl Imhoff, Jerry Lucas, Adrian Smith. It was a good team, and they won gold, and they went 8-0. Their first game, they won 88-54 against Italy. Second game, they won 125-66 against Japan. Third game, they won 107-63 against Hungary. Fourth game, they won 104-42 against Yugoslavia. Fifth game, the USA beat them 108-50. Sixth game, 81-57 against the USSR. I lost track. I think we're at 7. Seventh game, they went 112-81 against Italy. And the eighth game, they went 90-63 against Brazil. So you see, these games weren't even close. And Oscar Robertson, he averaged 17.3 points per game in the 60 Olympics. So like I said, he would go to the Cincinnati Royals, which are today the Sacramento Kings. And like I said, he was a territorial pick, and they gave him a $33,000 signing bonus. Now, I'm not sure what that is adjusted to today's inflation. But anyways, he has one of the greatest rookie campaigns in NBA history. He plays 71 games, putting up 30.5 points per game, 10.1 rebounds per game, 9.7 assists per game. And this Cincinnati team, they had been good in their career. They hadn't gotten it done yet. Their only championship at this point was 51, I believe, when they were in Rochester. But unfortunately, this team had a streak of bad luck. So their best player in the late 50s, which I'm sure a lot of NBA historians remember this guy, his name was Maurice Stokes. Now, Maurice Stokes was a 6'7" power forward during this time. He wasn't the most efficient scorer. I mean, you got to understand that back then, scoring field goal percentages weren't as efficient as they are today. But he was a great rebounder, got a lot of assists, and in the 57-58 season for Cincinnati, he had a concussion during the middle of a game. And he would end up getting post-traumatic illness in his brain, and he would become paralyzed, and he would ultimately die at the age of 36 in 1970. So that's a Hall of Famer that could have potentially played with Oscar Robertson. So you see, a lot of they weren't really some good teams. He didn't have good people around him, and his second best player was Jack Twyman. So they go 33-46 his rookie year. They don't make the playoffs at all. Like I said, it's not a good team. 61-62 season, his second year, they go 43-37. They lose in the first round against the Detroit Pistons. But one thing that stands out is Oscar Robertson became the first player in NBA history, and there's only 2 players to ever do this, but he averaged a triple-double. He put up 30.8 points per game, 11.4 assists per game, 12.5 rebounds per game, and he put up 47% field goal shooting, which for the time, and still today for a point guard, is really good. Now, in the 62-63 season, Oscar would lose in the second round against the Boston Celtics, losing in 7 games. And the Celtics pretty much dominated the 60s. They only lost 67 in that whole decade. And they lost 131-142. Sam Jones had 47 points in that game. Now, the 63-64 season, this team started to get better. They went 55-25. They would still lose to the Celtics in the second round, but everybody lost to the Celtics then. Oscar would average 31.4 points per game, 9.9 rebounds, and 11 assists per game. So you see how close he is to a triple-double again. And an interesting fact, if you take his averages from the 60-61 season and you average it to the 64-65 season, so like his first 5 seasons in the league, he actually averaged a triple-double for his career. Interesting fact. If you take the 60-61 to 64-65 averages, it's 30.3 points per game, 10.6 assists per game, and 10.4 rebounds per game. Now, like I said, he wasn't having success. 64-65 season, he went 48-32. They lost in the first round against the Philadelphia 76ers, 65-66. They would lose to the Celtics in the first round, 66-67. They would lose in the first round again. So you see, his teams didn't have much success, and even though at this point they'd had Jerry Lucas, who was his second best player, and the rest of the team was just trash. It was Oscar leading the pack with Jerry Lucas, and you got to understand during this time there was no free agency. It's not like you could just go sign with another team, which I'll get into why I bring that up in a minute. So 68, they don't make the playoffs at all, and 69, they don't make the playoffs either. So Oscar played on some pretty trash teams. Now, in the 69-70 season, here's an interesting fact, okay? They had Bob Cousy as their coach, who was a former Celtics player in the 50s. And Oscar and Cousy didn't get along. And Bob Cousy, this is kind of a crazy fact, he would play 7 games that season at the age of 4. 7 games that season as a player himself at the age of 41. Now, for the 70-71 season, Oscar wasn't even there because there was a dispute between Bob Cousy and Oscar Robertson. And you got to understand, like I said, at the time there wasn't a free agency, and Oscar wanted out. He wanted to play at a winning situation. And Cousy decided to trade him. So he ended up getting traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. And this turned out to be one of the best parts of Oscar Robertson's career. And they traded him for Flynn Robinson and Charlie Polk. I mean, that's not really shit to trade him for. He just wanted to get rid of Oscar because he didn't like him. But anyways, his first full season there was in 70-71 in Milwaukee. And at this point, his prime was done. He was 32 years old. And he put up 19.4 points per game. So his scoring dipped. Because the year before, he put up 25 points per game. But that's because he no longer had to be the scorer because he's playing with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the Bucks. So the Bucks would go 66-16, and they win their championship. So against the Baltimore Bullets. So now Oscar is now a champion. And he would go on and play the 71-72 season there. That'd be his last All-Star year. He'd play the 73 season, and 74 was his final year. And in 74, the Bucks made it back to the finals, but they lost to the Celtics in 7 games. So that'd be the end of his career, and he was 35 at the time. So an interesting thing about Oscar Robertson's career is he's the only guard to win MVP during the 60s, because it was all Chamberlain, Russell, Willis Reed, Reed won in 70, I'm sorry. Wes Unseld. So he's the only guard to win MVP. He won it in the 64 season. And he was magnificent as an individual. One of the most complete point guards of all time. For his career, he averaged 25 points per game, 9.5 assists per game, and 7.5 rebounds. He's a 6-time assist champion, a 1971 champion, like I mentioned. So he put in the accolades. And one thing you got to know is he's a top 3 point guard of all time. Now, some people, and I shouldn't say some people, I'd say most people would put Magic Johnson above Oscar. And this is because Magic has all the accolades. But you got to understand, like I was telling you, there was no free agency back then. What if there was free agency back then and he didn't have to wait to the end of his career to feud with Bob Cousy to get traded to a good team? What if he was able to sign with another team in his prime and win 5 championships? Would you look at him much different? Because his numbers are insane. So anyways, I want to talk about how he helped create free agency. So, like I mentioned to you guys, he was having problems in Cincinnati with his coach, and he forced a trade. Now, like I said, there's no free agency. So he would sue the National Basketball Association. And the suit was followed by the NBA's Player Association against the league. And I'm going to read this paragraph from you. This isn't my own speaking. This is from a website I pulled up. So, as Robertson was the president of the Players Association, the case bore his name in the suit. The proposed merger between the NBA and American Basketball Association was delayed until 1976, and the college draft as well as free agency clauses were reformed. Robertson himself had stated the main reason was that clubs basically own their players. Players was forbidden to talk to other clubs once their contract was up. Because free agency did not exist until 1988, 6 years after the suit was followed, the NBA finally reached a settlement between the ABA and NBA, and the merger took place. Oscar Robertson's suit encouraged signing of more free agents and eventually took higher salaries for all players. On the hardwood, the veteran Robertson still proved he was a valuable player. Okay, I'm reading a little far into what I shouldn't be reading. So he was instrumental in creating free agency. And I know a lot of people nowadays are burned out on the whole super team. Let's go buddy and join up. But I'd rather see an era where players aren't forced to play for a team. I like seeing people have the freedom to move. So Oscar is a true legend for this. And without Oscar Robertson, you probably wouldn't have that. And back then, it sucked because you were drafted to a team. If they don't want to get rid of you, you're stuck there. What choice do you have other than retire or force a trade? But if they don't want to trade you, you're stuck there. So you got to commemorate Oscar for that. Don't just look at that he only had 1 championship. So look at his numbers. There's no doubt in my mind if he had 5 championships, he'd be looked at as one of the greatest point guards of all time. Maybe greater than Magic, but history and time has kind of consumed Oscar. He's kind of forgotten nowadays. And he's still alive and going strong. Like if you watch the 2021 NBA Finals, you saw him sitting courtside next to Kareem. So it's good to see him still out there. So let me know what you guys think. Appreciate you guys watching.